It was precisely 3 minutes past 6 when Colonel Ambrose Faversham of Hawthorne Edge collapsed face first into a plate of pickled haddock, thereby upsetting the sideboard and startling his spinster sister into a crescendo of teaspoons. The colonel, a man of rigid habit and rigorous digestion, had scarcely missed a breakfast in 30 years. Thus, when he failed to revive after falling into the smoked fish, there was, even among his rather dense household, a general agreement that something was amiss. "I believe," Miss Clarissa Faversham quavered, once she had been persuaded to set down the nutmeg grater she had grasped in lieu of smelling salts, "that my brother has suffered some sort of seizure." The cook, Mrs. Budge, of uncertain age and formidable apron, sniffed. "He were right as rain when I gave him the kedgeree, miss, only grunted when I brought the haddock. Course I never took to fish before tea myself. Unnatural hour for such." By the time Dr. Faunce, summoned from the village in a flurry of bicycle clips and resentment, had declared the colonel unambiguously dead. "A look about the eyes I don't like at all, no, sir." The assembled household stood in various attitudes of horrified inconvenience, like a Dutch painting executed with insufficient perspective. It was, curiously enough, not the local constable who initiated the involvement of Lord Peter Wimsey, but a letter. It arrived as letters do in a neat cream envelope addressed in an angular aristocratic hand, to one Bunter, C.O. his lordship, Piccadilly. It contained but a few cryptic lines. "Regrettable incident at Hawthorne Edge. A circumstance, a clock, and a curious sound I believe may be best served by your master's attention. Yours, always in too much ink and not enough courage, Rail." Now, as fate and the railways would have it, Lord Peter Wimsey was at that very moment sipping a tepid tisane in his London drawing-room, perusing the Times obituaries and sighing at the literary quality of death notices in the interwar years. "Bunter," he murmured, without looking up, "do you suppose a man who dies at breakfast can be said to have had a late morning?" "I should imagine it would depend, my lord, upon whether the haddock was responsible." "Ah, that old fellow Faversham is dead, Colonel Ambrose. Rangy chap, fond of discipline and teetotaling. Flogged me at Eton for insufficient polish on the spats. Quite right, too. A regrettable loss, my lord. Regrettable to the haddock, certainly." Lord Peter folded the paper with the elegance of one who has never needed to read the advertisements on the back, and took the letter Bunter had wordlessly laid beside him. A clock, a circumstance, and a curious sound. Sounds like the beginning of a clergyman's joke. Or a murder, probably both. Wasn't Faversham's house that odd Gothic thing with the ecclesiastical gargoyles and the dining-room under a belfry? "I believe so, my lord. The estate agent's description was neo-Romanesque with modifications." "How ghastly," said Wimsey cheerfully. "Let us go at once." And so, with a certain briskness and not without an absurdly detailed discussion of whether one should take an umbrella to Yorkshire in April, an affectation unless one desires to be mistaken for a curate, Lord Peter Wimsey made his way to Hawthorne Edge. It was not merely the death, of course. People were always obliging enough to die in their country houses, particularly if they had been unkind to nephews or made remarks about their cook's aspic. No, what interested Wimsey was the mention of the knock, for in certain circles, those composed of men with monocles and too much time, a knock heard on the back stair at an impossible hour was not a thing one ignored. He arrived 2 days later with Bunter in tow and a hat that seemed to have been chosen entirely for its offensive incongruity with northern stone. The reception was cool, though the weather was not. Miss Faversham greeted Wimsey with the pinched expression of one who suspects the aristocracy of cheerfulness. "My brother, Lord Peter," she said, not quite welcoming, "was not a man who kept strange company." "I assure you," said Wimsey, inspecting the brass door-knocker with elaborate interest, "neither do I. Strange company is frightfully unreliable, always dropping dead on the breakfast tray." "I do not find levity amusing, Lord Peter." Most people don't, Miss Faversham. That's why I keep it to myself. Now, I'd like to see the dining room. Perhaps the haddock will speak to me." There was, of course, more than haddock to see. A shattered teacup on the sideboard, an overturned chair no one remembered moving, and, most interestingly, an antique clock of Bohemian manufacture whose face had stopped at 6:03, though its internal workings ticked on in a faintly mocking fashion. Whimsy bent to examine it, eyes glinting. "Bunter," he said quietly, "what do you make of this mechanism?" "It appears to have been tampered with, my lord. The hands move, but the chimes have been disabled, and this faint indentation at the base, possibly the result of a sharp blow." "Just so," murmured Whimsy. "And the floorboards?" "Sanded recently, yet curiously only in a patch to the left of the sideboard. I should say someone desired silence where there had formerly been squeak. Silent floors, a stopped clock, and a corpse at breakfast. Add in a knock on the back stair, and we've nearly got a ghost story. But not quite, my lord." "No," said Whimsy, straightening. "Ghosts rarely remember to tamper with clocks." He turned back to Miss Faversham with a smile like frost on a silver spoon. "Now then," he said, "tell me precisely what you heard at 5:47 on the morning your brother died, and do leave nothing out, not even the peculiar creak in the pantry door, or the dreadful clanging of the chapel bell that no one rings. Especially not that." The lady blinked. "But I told the inspector I was asleep." "Oh, yes," said Whimsy, eyes glittering. "But sleep, Miss Faversham, is a vastly overrated alibi." Miss Clarissa Faversham blinked again, rapidly this time, as though some mote of disbelief had settled on her vision and could be whisked away with a sufficient fluttering of lashes. "I really cannot say, Lord Peter. I rise rather later than Ambrose. He was always up before 6, his old military habit, and I scarcely stir before 7. Cook brings my tea. But I certainly heard no bell nor any knock." "No? But surely you remember what you did hear. The ticking of a grandfather clock, perhaps, or the crumpling of bed linen, or the uncanny silence of something not happening, which generally does. Most of us remember what breaks a rhythm, Miss Faversham, even if only in retrospect." She looked distinctly affronted. "I was asleep, Lord Peter. If my hearing failed to record the exact turnings of the house's hinges or chimes, I do beg your pardon." "Pardon quite granted," said Whimsy smoothly. "One must always allow for the vagaries of slumber. I myself once slept through an entire German bombardment and a fire in the officers' latrine, though I suspect that was more a matter of brandy than bravery." He turned abruptly, with that peculiar energy of movement that belied his apparent languor, and crossed to the tall, narrow window beside the sideboard. "This, I take it, looks out onto the back stair?" "It does." She hesitated. "Though we never use it. Not unless there are deliveries, or once a year at the harvest festival, when the vicar insists on entering by the tradesman's path for humility's sake." "And the door?" "Locked, always. It's old, warped, sticks in the rain." "Ah," said Whimsy, fingering the thick velvet curtain with the air of a man measuring humidity through textiles. "And yet someone heard a knock here the morning of the Colonel's death." "I did not say that." "No," he agreed, "but your letter writer did." He turned sharply, drawing from his coat the enigmatic note sent to Bunter, and handed it to her. She read it quickly, and a faint furrow settled in her brow. "This is not my handwriting, nor that of anyone in this house." Whimsy took it back, smiling faintly. "I rather thought not. Too much flair. Someone desperate for assistance, but afraid of being known to have asked for it. Do you know who L is?" "Not yet, but it is one of the few alphabetical mysteries I feel confident of resolving without an abacus." He paused. "Miss Faversham, who else was in the house the morning your brother died?" "Myself, of course. Mrs. Budge. Annie, the housemaid. Joseph, the manservant, and young Henry, Ambrose's godson." "Godson? He's staying here?" Ambrose promised him a few quiet weeks of study before he enters the Colonial Office. The boy's of a nervous disposition. I dare say he's had less quiet than anticipated. And where, pray, was he lodged? The Blue Room, at the end of the East Corridor. Whimsy nodded, already moving toward the door with that insouciant elegance that always gave the impression he was more interested in the walk than the destination. Come, Bunter. Let's go examine the sanctum of scholarly dread. The Blue Room turned out to be a gloomy chamber at the end of a long, threadbare hallway, lined with ancestral paintings and a single, sinister suit of armor that seemed, improbably, to lean toward passers-by. Whimsy knocked, waited, and then rapped again, this time with a rhythmic tap that seemed uncannily like Morse code. Eventually, the door creaked open, and a young man of pallid complexion and intelligent eyes peered out, blinking. "Lord Peter Whimsy?" he said with a hopeful uncertainty. "I was told you might come." "Indeed. And you must be Mr. Henry Martingale." "Yes. Yes. Come in, won't you?" The room was scattered with books. Tacitus, The Times, and a rather grubby copy of The Golden Bough lay jostling one another on a crooked writing desk. A kettle hissed gently near the hearth, and an opened packet of digestive biscuits offered a melancholy sort of hospitality. "You were the last to see the Colonel alive, I believe?" asked Whimsy, easing into a chair with a feline sort of sprawl. Henry nodded, then hesitated. Yes, I think I was. I came down early. Couldn't sleep. I've had a bit of neuralgia, and the rain was drumming awfully. I saw him in the breakfast room. He was finishing the kedgeree." "And did he seem well?" "He was grumbling about the post. Said the morning letter hadn't arrived. That was odd. It usually does by 6. "Anything else?" He said the clock was wrong." Whimsy's eyebrows lifted. "Ah, the clock. That charming, erratic heirloom that has stopped at the precise moment your godfather expired?" "Yes, but he didn't say it had stopped. Only that it was wrong. He said it was running fast." "Interesting. And what time was it then?" "Just before 6. 5:50-something. I went back upstairs because I thought I heard a knock." Whimsy leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "A knock?" "Yes, on the back stair. Very soft. It only came once. I thought I imagined it, honestly, but it was strange. No one uses that stair." "Why didn't you investigate?" I suppose I was frightened, or lazy, or both. It didn't seem urgent." Whimsy was silent for a moment, letting the shape of silence stretch comfortably in the space between them. "You realize, Mr. Martingale," he said at last, "that you may be the only person who heard the precise moment at which the mechanism of murder was set in motion." What do you mean?" "I mean," said Whimsy, rising, "that knocks do not knock themselves. Clocks do not mislead without human agency, and men in the habit of digesting smoked fish do not simply fall into it, never to rise again without assistance." He smiled and turned to Bunter. "Fetch me the household, would you, Bunter? I should like to ask them all a few gentle, irrelevant questions, preferably at the same time." "Very good, my lord." "And you, Mr. Martingale," Whimsy said, pausing in the doorway. "Think carefully. The sound you heard, it came from the back stair. But was it above you or below?" Henry blinked. I'm not sure." "Do try to be, for if it was above, we have one sort of problem, and if it was below—" "Yes?" "Then I'm afraid, dear boy, someone was already in the house." And with that, Whimsy departed down the narrow hallway, the ancestral portraits watching him go with their usual blend of boredom and faint reproach. Lord Peter Whimsy returned from the corridor with the faintest glint in his eye, a half-smile that suggested something amusing had occurred to him, though he'd no intention of sharing it yet. Bunter, ever discreet and already a length ahead, had begun assembling the household in the long, narrow drawing-room with its chintz furniture and unconvincing portraits. The sort of room, Whimsy often said, that looked as though it expected Queen Victoria to return and sit down at any moment. Clarissa Faversham perched upright in a spindle-backed chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Next to her stood Mrs. Budge, who had abandoned her apron but retained her habitual scowl. Annie, the maid, hovered near the door with that wide-eyed look peculiar to country girls, caught up in scandal. Joseph, the manservant, stooped and colourless, stood beside the drinks cabinet, where he maintained the air of one quietly judging everyone for their impertinence. Henry Martingale, called down again, slumped into an armchair by the fireplace, legs crossed awkwardly, face tight with fatigue. His fingers fidgeted with a single biscuit that had crumbled to near dust in his palm. Whimsy entered, taking up a standing position near the piano, upon which sat a metronome and a spray of artificial lilies that looked as though they had long since given up pretending. "Now then," he said brightly, "if I may be forgiven the theatricality of it, though I fear I rarely am, I thought it might be rather helpful to gather the household for a spot of mental tidying. So dreadfully easy for one's thoughts to become cluttered after a sudden death. So, let's do away with clutter." He turned toward Annie first. "You, my dear, were the first to discover that the Colonel had become entangled with his breakfast, were you not?" I came in just after 6, sir," she said, eyes darting toward Miss Faversham. "He didn't answer when I said good morning, so I went closer, and then I screamed, and then I ran to fetch Miss. Quite right, too. A sound response to a corpse. Now tell me, did you notice anything unusual about the room when you entered?" Annie hesitated. "Only the cup, sir. The teacup. It were broken." "Indeed. And where was the teapot?" "On the sideboard, where I left it, sir." "Did you pour the tea yourself?" "No, sir. That's Joseph's job in the morning. I just lay out the tray with the toast and the eggs." Whimsy turned to Joseph. "A grave duty, Joseph. Tea before eggs, or eggs before tea. Whole wars have been started over less. You serve the Colonel?" "Yes, my lord," he said softly. "At his instruction. I brought the pot in at 10 minutes to 6. He was already seated." "And in good spirits?" "I couldn't say. He didn't speak except to ask for the paper." "Did you pour him a cup?" "I did. And then?" "I left. Back to the pantry. Leaving behind the pot, of course." "Yes, my lord." "Now, how long between then and Annie's scream?" Joseph furrowed his brow. "Perhaps 10 minutes. No more." Said Whimsy, turning to Mrs. Budge. "And you, Mrs. Budge? Busy at the stove?" "Yes, my lord. Kedgeree done by 5:45. Started the haddock just after. I don't leave the kitchen once I've got fish on." A commendable fidelity to timing. So, no one else entered the breakfast room between Joseph's tea service and Annie's discovery of the body? Silence. Clarissa's mouth twitched. Certainly not. No mysterious butlers slipping through a hidden panel. No dark horseman descending the chimney. Really, Lord Peter, forgive me, I find absurdity useful. It makes the impossible easier to spot. Now then, let's return to the matter of the knock. This drew a shift in the air. Whimsy watched them closely. "Mr. Martingale heard it, but no one else has mentioned it. Are you all quite certain you heard nothing unusual before the scream?" There was a pause. Then Annie said quietly, "I did think I heard something. When I came down the back corridor, like someone knocking, but soft. Could have been the pipes, I suppose." Whimsy looked at her sharply. "And what time was that?" "Maybe 5 to 6, sir. Just before I went in." He turned to Clarissa. "And you, madam? You mentioned being asleep, but even the most delicate ear may catch a sound in that strange hour before full waking." She stiffened. "I heard nothing." "I see." He looked at Joseph, who gave a minute shake of the head. Mrs. Budge was frowning. There was something odd, she said suddenly. The cat. Indeed, said Whimsy, delighted. We've brought in the feline, have we? Please continue. Old Knox, he lives in the scullery most days, came racing out like the devil. Was after him around 10 to 6, fur all up, tail like a brush. Never seen him in such a state. And from which direction did this panicked puss arrive? From the back corridor, near the stair. Whimsy's eyes glittered. Ah, delightful. A knock and a fleeing cat. My dear Miss Faversham, it appears your house has developed a flair for the theatrical. She sniffed. Perhaps the beast was frightened by Annie clattering about. I wasn't clattering, Annie said hotly. I'm quiet in the mornings. Whimsy raised a hand. Peace, peace. We are here to investigate a death, not rehearse a melodrama, though the two are often closely related. He turned to the entire group. Let me suggest a small theory, just for fun. Imagine, pure speculation, that the knock was made not by someone arriving, but by someone leaving, someone who had entered much earlier, someone already in the house. Impossible, said Clarissa flatly. The doors are locked at night, all of them, my brother insisted. And yet the back stair has no bolt on the inside, merely a chain, which incidentally was not fastened when I examined it this morning. She paled. Now then, Whimsy continued, if someone wished to poison the colonel, tea perhaps, or fish paste, the ideal moment would be just before 6 when the tea was delivered. Joseph, you prepared the pot? No, my lord. The pot was already in the warming cabinet. I just added water from the kettle. Who placed the tea in the pot? Joseph hesitated. Cook usually lays out the breakfast tray. Not the pot, Mrs. Budge interrupted. Miss Clarissa insists on handling the tea leaves herself. Says it's a matter of taste. All heads turned. Clarissa rose stiffly to her feet. Are you suggesting I poisoned my own brother? Not suggesting anything, Whimsy said mildly. Only following the chain of custody. That's what one must do with tea and truth. Speaking of which, Bunter. Yes, my lord? Would you mind testing the inside of that pot? And while you're at it, examine the broken cup. If there's residue, I imagine it may be instructive. Bunter departed silently. Whimsy turned back to the group. We're nearly finished. One last thing. Miss Faversham, what did your brother usually read at breakfast? The Times. Why? Because there was no paper on the table when I arrived. None in the room at all. Clarissa faltered. The boy, Henry. He said Ambrose mentioned it hadn't come. But you just said, I assumed it hadn't been delivered. I didn't notice it missing. Whimsy smiled without warmth. Curious. And yet Mr. Martingale remembers the colonel complaining that it was late, which suggests it often arrived early enough to be missed. Now I wonder, where did the paper go? Nobody answered. Bunter will have a look, Whimsy said lightly. It's amazing what turns up in waste. Bins. He stepped toward the door, turning back with one last remark. Oh, and if anyone should remember exactly what they were doing between 5:45 and 6:05 that morning, do make a note, for in that little slice of time, neatly sliced like toast soldiers, I suspect the key to this whole mystery lies waiting, rather like a cat behind a door, wondering whether to stay or flee. And with that, Lord Peter Whimsy swept from the room, leaving an uneasy hush behind. Bunter returned quietly a few moments later, bearing the silver teapot wrapped carefully in a clean cloth, and a small glass vial containing a faint residue scraped from the shattered cup's rim. He laid them gently on the sideboard before Whimsy, who took up the vial and inspected it closely, turning it in the lamplight. Aha, Whimsy murmured, his expression sharpening. This faint film is not merely dried tea leaves, or the usual dregs of breakfast beverages. There's something more chemical about it. He glanced up at the assembled group, who watched him with varying degrees of apprehension and curiosity. Bunter, do you have the reagents we brought along from London? The portable lab kit? Here, my lord, Bunter replied, producing a small leather case that he opened with practiced ease. Whimsy set the vial aside and reached inside, selecting a narrow pipette and a tiny bottle of reagent, then carefully dropped a single crystal into the residue. Almost immediately, a faint but unmistakable blue tint bloomed in the liquid. Cyanide, Whimsy announced quietly. There was a sharp intake of breath from the room. Clarissa's hand flew to her mouth. Henry Martingale's eyes widened, and even the usually unflappable Joseph looked unsettled. Cyanide, Annie whispered. But who would have such a thing here? Whimsy turned his gaze toward Clarissa. Miss Faversham, is your brother known to keep poisons on the premises, for scientific or perhaps hunting purposes? Not that I know of, she said, shaking her head. Ambrose was a retired military man, but he never mentioned anything like that, and certainly not cyanide. It's hardly a common household item. Indeed. Yet someone brought it here and used it. Now the question becomes, who had both the opportunity and the motive? He paced slowly across the room, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Miss Faversham, you told me your brother was complaining about the post that morning. Was there anything unusual about the mail, or had he been expecting any letters? Clarissa hesitated, glancing down. He mentioned he was expecting something important. A letter from a solicitor regarding a will, I think, but the postman hadn't come yet, and that seemed to irritate him. A will, Whimsy repeated thoughtfully. Could there be a motive there, then? Henry Martingale spoke up softly. Ambrose had mentioned once to me, quite in confidence, that there was some dispute in the family over his estate. He seemed rather worried, though he wouldn't say more. And were you aware of this dispute, Miss Faversham? I was. But Ambrose was a private man. He didn't want the household gossiping. He only told a few people. Whimsy nodded. That narrows the suspect pool somewhat, though as with all mysteries, the truth often hides in plain sight or in plain denial. He paused and glanced at each face in turn. Now, who had access to the back stair? It is locked at night, but you told me the chain was unfastened this morning. Joseph stepped forward. I have the keys, my lord. I lock the doors each night, but I did not fasten the chain on that door when I came in this morning, as I was carrying the morning's supplies and intended to secure it afterward. It slipped my mind. So potentially, someone could have entered or exited unseen via the back stair. Yes, my lord. Very well. Then it is imperative we find out who might have had motive to arrive or to slip away, using that stair. Whimsy looked thoughtfully toward Henry. You, Mr. Martingale, said you heard the knock coming from the back stair at just before 6. Henry nodded. Did you see anyone at the time? No, my lord. It was too dark, and the rain was falling hard. I only heard the sound. Could it have been the cat? Whimsy asked, referring to Mrs. Budge's earlier remark. Henry shook his head. No, it was more deliberate than that. A firm, quick tap, like a summons. Indeed, a summons. Whimsy turned to the group. Now, who would be expected to visit at such an hour? Or who might have been signaling someone inside the house? There was a silence as everyone considered this. Clarissa spoke cautiously. There was no scheduled visitor that I know of, except perhaps the solicitor, but he always came in the afternoon. Who, then, might be in the habit of arriving before dawn? Whimsy pressed. Annie looked nervous. I don't rightly know, sir, but I did see a figure once, late at night, near the servants' entrance. It was a man, tall, wearing a dark coat and a hat pulled low. I thought it might be one of the tradesmen, but it seemed odd to me. Can you be sure it was not one of us? Whimsy asked sharply. No, my lord, she replied. I was too far away to be certain. Whimsy's gaze returned to Clarissa. Did your brother have any enemies? Any disputes beyond the will, business rivals, old comrades turned sour? Clarissa's face darkened. There was one man. a former colleague from his military days. Captain Derek Fenton. They had a falling out some years ago. Bitter words. Derek was known to be hot-tempered. Where is Captain Fenton now? Last I heard, he was working as a consultant in London. Whimsy's eyes gleamed. London, you say? Interesting. Might he have reason to travel here clandestinely? Perhaps, Clarissa admitted. And if so, might he know the Back Stair? Only Ambrose, Joseph, and I know about it, she said quickly. It is kept secret for security. Secrets seldom stay secret, Whimsy murmured. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and began jotting notes. Now, Bunter, if you would be so good as to search the servants' quarters, the back stair, and any outbuildings for traces of recent footprints or any dropped items. Right away, my lord. As Bunter slipped away, Whimsy returned his attention to the group. Mrs. Budge, you mentioned the cat fleeing around 10 minutes before 6. Do you think the cat's behavior was related to the arrival or departure of someone? Mrs. Budge nodded firmly. I do. Old Knox is a wise beast. He senses danger. Quite right, said Whimsy. Animals rarely lie about danger. He turned toward the window. The rain, the darkness. This morning was a cloak for more than just the weather. Lord Peter, Clarissa said, voice low. What do you think really happened? Whimsy smiled faintly. I think, Miss Faversham, that Ambrose's death was no accident. The knock you heard, the unlocked door, the cat's flight, all these are threads in a tapestry of treachery. Someone came here in the dark, bearing poison, and set a trap masked as breakfast. He looked at Henry. Were you close to your godfather, Mr. Martingale? Very close, my lord. Then I suggest you consider carefully. Was there anyone you suspected might wish to harm him? Anyone who might have resented his plans or the contents of his will? Henry swallowed. There was a man, an old family friend, Mr. Cresswell, who had been acting strangely these past weeks. He argued often with Ambrose. Did your godfather trust him? More than anyone. Which makes it all the more shocking. Indeed. Whimsy stepped toward the door, signaling that the questioning was done for now. Let us reconvene once Bunter returns. I suspect that the real mystery lies not only in who had the means, but who had the opportunity and the nerve to use it. As the household slowly dispersed, Clarissa lingered, her face pale but determined. Lord Peter, she said quietly, I want to help. My brother deserves justice. And justice he shall have, Whimsy promised. Outside the window, the rain continued to fall, relentless and cold. Inside, the quiet hum of tension was only beginning to build. The trap had been set, and the game was afoot. Bunter returned with a quiet efficiency that bespoke his experience, his boots carrying no more sound than a soft whisper across the wooden floor. He laid out his findings methodically. Footprints dampened by the morning rain, faint impressions in the soft earth near the back stair, a scrap of dark fabric snagged on the wrought iron latch, and most intriguingly, a small brass button, ornate and unmistakably military in design. Whimsy bent over, the evidence with a half-smile. Ah, the details, my dear Bunter, are like a symphony's notes. It is in their precise arrangement that the melody of truth reveals itself. He turned the button over between his fingers, examining the intricate crest embossed upon it. This is no ordinary garment ornament, a regimental button most likely. Now, does this suggest our visitor had a military past or penchant, or is it merely a careless fragment lost in haste? Clarissa stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Ambrose always wore his old service coat when he took his evening walks. Could it have been his? Possible, Whimsy mused. But would a man as precise as your brother risk losing a button on his own garment? Especially one so emblematic of his past. It seems more plausible it belongs to another. Henry Martingale fidgeted uneasily. The regimental connection rings a bell. Captain Derek Fenton, He was known for his impeccable military dress, often wearing his old uniform for formal occasions. Wimsey's gaze sharpened. So, Captain Fenton's shadow falls upon us once more. Tell me, Mr. Martingale, what is your relationship with Captain Fenton? Have you spoken recently? Henry hesitated. I met him at a dinner party in London a fortnight ago. He seemed agitated. When I mentioned Ambrose's name, he grew cold and excused himself shortly thereafter. Curious, said Wimsey, stroking his chin thoughtfully. The frost of old grievances often burns hotter than fresh wounds. He turned to Clarissa. Miss Faversham, could Captain Fenton have had the knowledge of this back stair and the household's inner workings, or would he have needed an accomplice? No one outside this house knows of the back stair, she replied firmly, not even the solicitor or family friends. Then, Wimsey said, if Fenton was indeed involved, he must have had help, or else been intimately familiar with this place. A silence settled over the room, broken only by the distant chime of the grandfather clock striking 7. I propose, Wimsey continued, that we consider not only who wanted to see Ambrose dead, but who could navigate this house unseen, especially in the dark and rain. Joseph, who had been standing quietly in the corner, spoke up. My lord, only the household staff and Ambrose's closest family know the secret paths and doorways. The servants are trustworthy, and Miss Faversham has always been discreet. Yet discretion is sometimes a veil for something darker, Wimsey observed. He paced toward the window, the fogged glass blurring the outside world into a pale watercolor. There is another aspect we must explore, he said, turning back to the group. The timing of the murder. If Ambrose was to receive a letter regarding his will, the sender's identity and the delivery time are crucial. Clarissa nodded. The postman was delayed, yes, but a private letter was delivered, just after 6 by a local courier. Did anyone see this courier? Wimsey asked. Yes, Joseph took the letter inside, Clarissa replied. Ambrose opened it immediately, but he seemed disturbed and tore it up. Destroyed evidence, Wimsey noted. Classic, yet revealing. He glanced at Bunter. Might we recover any fragments of the letter? Bunter produced a small envelope from his pocket. Found under the writing desk, my lord. A torn piece with some words legible. Wimsey read the snippet aloud, voice low but clear. Final wishes? Contested. Urgent meeting. Must act quickly. The solicitor's hand, undoubtedly, Wimsey concluded. Ambrose was being pressured, perhaps threatened. But by whom? Clarissa asked, her voice trembling. Ah, Miss Faversham, therein lies the knot we must untie. Wimsey paused, eyes distant as if replaying the morning's events like a film strip. The knock at the back stair, he murmured. Was it truly a summons, or a prelude to violence? The knock's timing suggests the visitor expected a response, and the unlocked chain implies intent. He turned sharply. Mr. Martingale, were you aware of any tensions between Ambrose and any party over the will, beyond Captain Fenton and Mr. Cresswell? Henry shifted. There was a distant cousin, Thomas Hargreaves, known for his fiery temper and considerable debts. He had approached Ambrose recently for financial aid, but was refused. A motive, then, Wimsey agreed, though motive alone is a poor companion to opportunity. He glanced at the servants, his gaze settling on Annie. Miss O'Connell, you mentioned seeing a man in a dark coat near the servants' entrance on a recent night. Could you describe him more fully? Annie swallowed, cheeks flushing. He was tall, as I said, with broad shoulders. His hat shadowed his face, but I thought I caught the glint of spectacles. Spectacles, you say? And did he speak or leave any calling card? No, my lord. He vanished when he saw me. Wimsey rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Spectacled and tall, Captain Fenton was known for his spectacles. A clever disguise could be as simple as a coat and hat. He moved back toward the tea table, lifting the shattered cup again and noting its position. Now, the poison, cyanide, fast-acting and lethal. A daring choice, pointing to premeditation. But how was it administered? Clarissa looked puzzled. In his tea, presumably. But I prepared that breakfast. I did not see anything unusual. Did anyone else handle the tea or the cup before it reached Ambrose? Joseph shook his head. No one, my lord. The breakfast was served by Miss Faversham herself. Whimsy's eyes flicked to Clarissa. And you have no suspicion? None, she said firmly. Yet, Whimsy mused, someone had to prepare that cup, introduce the poison, and place it where Ambrose would drink, without suspicion, a task requiring access and opportunity. He folded his hands and spoke with measured clarity. Let us consider the logistics. The poison was in the tea, which Ambrose drank immediately. The cup was smashed, perhaps in a sudden spasm of death or struggle. The knock at the back stair may have been a signal to someone inside, or a warning missed. His eyes sparkled with ironic detachment. In such matters, one must attend to the minutiae. Misaligned clocks, unlatched doors, footsteps in the rain, even a fleeing cat. A faint smile curved his lips. The grotesque beauty of human folly, when masked by politeness and routine. He turned to Bunter. Have we any reports on the clocks in the house? Any discrepancies noted this morning? Bunter nodded. Yes, my lord. The clock in the study where Ambrose was found was 5 minutes slow. 5 minutes? Whimsy raised an eyebrow. And the hallway clock? Accurate to the minute. So, the study clock, could it have been stopped deliberately or merely neglected? Mrs. Budge mentioned she wound the clocks yesterday evening as usual. Curious, Whimsy muttered. A clock 5 minutes slow can throw an alibi or timeline into chaos. He looked at the assembled household. Who was in the study between 5 and 6 this morning? Clarissa was the first to answer, only Ambrose and myself. Miss Faversham, did you notice the clock's discrepancy? No, my lord. Joseph? No, my lord. Mrs. Budge? No, my lord. Whimsy regarded them all with a faint, inscrutable smile. Very well. We shall need to test these times against other events. The knocking, the letter's arrival, Ambrose's last movements, all must be reconciled. He turned toward the window again, watching the rain's slow descent. The stage is set for the next act. A double life or a hidden accomplice may yet emerge. Until then, we must sift the facts with care, like a jeweler examining a flawed diamond, seeking the true facet beneath the surface. As the household resumed their subdued activities, Whimsy remained thoughtful, the cogs of deduction turning ceaselessly behind his composed exterior. The mystery was no longer a mere puzzle of who, but why and how. A game of shadows within this quaint house, where politeness cloaked menace and every knock at the door might herald a secret waiting to be unmasked. The next morning dawned grey and damp, the relentless rain having softened to a steady drizzle. Whimsy, accompanied by Bunter, resumed his meticulous examination of the house and grounds, beginning again at the back stair. The worn steps were slick with moisture, and small scattered footprints marred the soft earth beyond the threshold. Whimsy knelt, tracing the outlines with a gloved finger. "These prints are fresh," he murmured. Judging by the depth and the pattern, the visitor was cautious, almost furtive, moving, deliberately yet without haste. Not a servant's step, I think, nor that of Mr. Martingale or Miss Faversham. Bunter, squinting at the prints, nodded. "Agreed, my lord. The tread is heavy, solid, but not clumsy. Someone used to walking silently but assuredly." They followed the trail around the side of the house, where the footprints abruptly vanished near a dense clump of bushes. Whimsy rose, surveying the landscape thoughtfully. Now, why vanish here? Did the visitor retreat this way after their grim deed? Or did they approach from this direction, choosing a path less visible? Either way, Bunter remarked, we must find who lingered near the back of the house just before dawn. Inside, the household was stirring, tension still lingering like a low fog. Clarissa appeared at the door of the sitting room, her face pale but resolute. "Lord Peter, I've been thinking about the letter," she said softly. "Ambrose's torn note. It mentioned an urgent meeting, but I can't recall any plans. He had to meet someone today." "Who would benefit from such a meeting being disrupted?" Whimsy asked, folding his arms. "That's the question," she replied. "And who might have wanted to ensure it never took place?" At that moment, Bunter entered, carrying a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "I examined the fragments of the letter more closely, my lord," he reported. "Using a magnifier and careful reassembly, I managed to piece together a few more words." Whimsy's eyes gleamed. "Please, Bunter, let us hear them." Bunter unfolded the fragile scraps and read aloud, "Proceed with caution. Opposition strong. Final arrangements must be sealed before the week's end." "Ambrose was under pressure, clearly," Whimsy said. "This opposition, who does it refer to? The family, business rivals, or something more personal?" Clarissa stepped forward. "Ambrose was considering a new will that would cut out certain relatives, including the cousin, Thomas Hargreaves." "Then Thomas Hargreaves becomes a person of interest," Whimsy said grimly. "But let us not forget Captain Fenton and Mr. Cresswell. All three have motive. But which had opportunity? And who dared the poison?" He paused, eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Budge, might I have a word?" The housekeeper approached, her face lined with fatigue but composed. "Mrs. Budge, did you notice anything unusual last night? Any sounds, voices, footsteps that seemed out of place?" Mrs. Budge shook her head slowly. "No, my lord, but I confess I was up late. I heard a door close softly just after midnight, but thought it was the wind." "Was that the front door? The back door? Which one?" "Front door, I think." "Did you see who it was?" "No, my lord. It was too dark, and I did not leave my room." "Very well. Thank you." Whimsy's mind was already weaving possibilities. Someone had arrived or departed late at night, unnoticed, potentially using the front door. But the visitor earlier, just before dawn, came through the back stair. He turned to Bunter. "Check the visitor's log if there is one, and see if anyone unusual has been recorded. Also, ask the neighbors if they heard or saw anything last night." "Yes, my lord." As Bunter left, Whimsy gathered Clarissa and Henry. "We must reconstruct Ambrose's last day, hour by hour, minute by minute. Who saw him, who spoke with him, and who might have harbored grudges deep enough to kill?" Clarissa swallowed, nodding. "I was with him until 8 last night. We spoke about the solicitor's letter and the will. He was troubled but determined." Henry added, "I visited briefly after dinner, but he was alone in his study." "Did you notice anyone else in the house? Servants acting oddly, visitors lingering?" "No," Clarissa said quickly, "but Joseph was absent for part of the evening." Whimsy raised an eyebrow. "Absent? Where was he?" Clarissa hesitated. "He said he was running an errand to the village, but that seemed odd given the weather." "Indeed." The pieces were assembling. A late-night visitor at the front door, Joseph's absence, a furtive visitor at the back stair, a poisoned cup of tea, torn letters hinting at pressure and opposition. As if summoned by thought, Joseph appeared at the doorway, looking unsettled. "My lord," he said, "I understand you have questions. I was out last night, yes, but only briefly, to collect medicine for Mrs. Budge." Whimsy regarded him thoughtfully. "Medicine? What sort?" "A tincture for her arthritis. The apothecary is in the village. I left around 10 and returned before midnight." "Alone?" "Yes, my lord." "Did you see anyone on your way?" "No one, my lord. The roads were deserted." Whimsy nodded slowly, filing this information away. "Very well, Joseph. Thank you." Once he left, Whimsy turned to the others. "We must verify his story, but meanwhile, I want to return to the morning of the murder." He paced to the study door. "Ambrose was found in this room. The poison was administered in his tea. Only those who had access to his breakfast could have done this. Clarissa, you prepared the tea, but can you swear no one interfered? I was alone, my lord. I prepared everything myself. Bunter, any sign of tampering with the tea or utensils? No, my lord, but the shattered cup might suggest a sudden illness or shock, which is consistent with cyanide poisoning, rapid, fatal, and terrifying. Whimsy stopped suddenly, a realization dawning. Consider this. If the killer could not enter openly, they might have bribed or coerced someone inside to assist, or to turn a blind eye. He looked at Joseph. Joseph, were you alone last night in the servants' quarters? Any new faces? Joseph hesitated. No, my lord, only the usual staff. Are you sure? Might anyone have slipped in unnoticed? Any stranger passing through? No one, my lord. I would have noticed, Clarissa interjected, voice steady but urgent. My lord, there is one person we have not considered. Whimsy looked at her keenly. Who? Miss Annie O'Connell. She said she saw a man near the servants' entrance recently. Could she have been pressured or even threatened? Whimsy nodded slowly. Very well. Annie, come here, please. Annie approached, cheeks flushed. Annie, when exactly did you see the man? A few nights ago, my lord, about midnight. Did you recognize him? No, sir, but he wore a military-style coat and glasses. Did he speak to you? Did he ask for anything? No, sir. He disappeared when he saw me. Whimsy looked thoughtful. A man fitting that description appears repeatedly in our story. Could Captain Fenton be more involved than we imagined? Or is there an impersonator at work? Clarissa bit her lip. Captain Fenton is a man of honor, but if he has a grudge, it may run deep. Whimsy smiled faintly, the sharp glint in his eyes undiminished. We must bring Captain Fenton into our inquiry, but cautiously. Meanwhile, I wish to examine Ambrose's study for any overlooked clues. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the drizzle outside. Whimsy's gaze swept the desk, the scattered papers, the small personal items. A silver pen, a leather-bound notebook, a photograph of Ambrose and a younger man in uniform. He picked up the notebook, leafing through pages dense with handwriting. Careful, precise. Suddenly, a slip of paper fluttered from between the pages. Whimsy caught it and smoothed it out. It was a torn fragment with hastily scribbled words. Meet at the crossroads. Danger. Trust no one. His pulse quickened. This changes everything, he murmured. Clarissa leaned in. Breath caught. A secret meeting? Someone warning Ambrose? Yes, Whimsy said softly. And someone who feared for his life. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen as the storm outside rumbled anew. The threads of this tangled web were tightening, and Whimsy knew the next revelation would be pivotal. He closed the notebook with deliberate calm. The hour approaches when hidden truths must be drawn into the light. Let us prepare to uncover what lies beneath the surface of appearances. Outside, the rain continued to fall, steady and unrelenting, as the mystery thickened like the gathering clouds. Whimsy folded the torn slip carefully and placed it in his breast pocket, his expression grave yet thoughtful. The urgency in those few hastily scrawled words had injected a fresh pulse of energy into the investigation. A secret meeting at the crossroads, a warning of danger, and the chilling admonition to trust no one. These were clues that hinted at a conspiracy far deeper than a simple dispute over a will or family grudges. As he looked around the dim study, the room felt charged with the weight of unspoken secrets. Clarissa broke the silence. Lord Peter, who could have sent such a note? Someone close to Ambrose, perhaps. Or an enemy reaching out in desperation? It could be either, Whimsy replied slowly. But whoever it was clearly feared for Ambrose's safety, and that fear was well-founded. We must discover when this note was written and who had access to it. Bunter, see if you can trace the paper and ink. Sometimes such details betray their origin. Bunter nodded and immediately set about gathering the fragments of correspondence and other papers strewn about the desk, careful not to disturb the subtle dust pattern or evidence of hurried activity. Meanwhile, Whimsy's eyes drifted toward the photograph on the desk, the one showing Ambrose with a younger man in military uniform. The similarity to Captain Fenton was striking. A quick comparison with recent photographs confirmed their likeness. Clearly, the two men shared a past. "Clarissa," Whimsy said quietly, "I believe this man was Captain Fenton, or someone close to him. Their connection may be key." She nodded, lips pressed tightly. "Ambrose told me once about a friendship gone sour, a disagreement that tore apart the men he had served with. Captain Fenton was once his closest comrade, but years of bitterness had settled between them." Whimsy's gaze sharpened. That may explain why Fenton would be involved. But the mystery remains. Who sent the warning? And why did Ambrose choose to destroy the letter from the solicitor, rather than heed this other message? At that moment, Bunter returned, holding a small bundle. "My lord, I have brought samples of the paper and ink for analysis. I will arrange for an expert to examine them immediately. Also, the paper appears to be of the same quality and manufacturer as that used in the solicitor's correspondence, but the ink differs slightly, an important detail." "Excellent," Whimsy said. "It suggests the warning note might have come from within the solicitor's office, or perhaps an associate with access to the stationery, but not identical to the official letters." Clarissa's brows knitted in concern. Could it be someone trying to warn Ambrose while hiding their identity? Exactly. A secret ally, perhaps, or a double agent in this tangled affair. Whimsy's mind then returned to the clocks, the discrepancies in time. He turned to Joseph, who was lingering quietly nearby. "Joseph, you claimed to be out for only a short time last night. Do you recall precisely when you left and returned?" Joseph glanced nervously. "I left around 10, my lord, and was back before midnight. The roads were empty, and I walked briskly to the apothecary." "Did you notice anything unusual on your way? Lights, sounds, vehicles?" "No, my lord, only the rain and the occasional splash of a cartwheel." Whimsy's brow furrowed. "And did you pass by the crossroads mentioned in the note?" Joseph hesitated. "Yes, but it was dark and deserted." "Did you see anyone lingering there?" "No, sir. I was too intent on my errand to look around much." Whimsy exchanged a glance with Clarissa. That crossroads could have been the intended meeting place? If so, why was the meeting never held? Clarissa's voice trembled slightly. "Because Ambrose was killed before he could go." "Precisely. Someone wanted to prevent that meeting at all costs." Whimsy's attention shifted to the shattered cup and the poison's delivery. The poison had been introduced into Ambrose's tea, a drink prepared and served by Clarissa herself, who maintained she had no idea how it had been tampered with. Yet the possibility remained that someone had access to the kitchen or the study before breakfast. "Who else has keys to the study or kitchen?" Whimsy asked. Clarissa answered promptly. "Only the household staff and Mr. Martingale. No one else has such access." "Mr. Martingale, is that correct?" Henry nodded, his face set. "I have the keys, but was not in the house early this morning. I arrived only after breakfast." "Can anyone corroborate that?" Clarissa and Joseph exchanged looks, but said nothing. "Very well," Whimsy continued. "We must confirm these alibis. And what of the servants? Annie, for instance. She mentioned seeing a man in a military coat near the servants' entrance." Clarissa said quietly. She seemed frightened, but reluctant to speak. Whimsy gestured for Annie to be brought forward. The young woman entered, cheeks flushed but resolute. "Annie," Whimsy began gently, "tell me more about this man you saw. Did he say anything to you? Did he leave anything behind?" Annie shook her head. "No, sir. He didn't speak to me. Just looked around, then hurried off when he saw me." "Do you recognize him now, with the benefit of time?" "No, sir. His face was partly hidden beneath a hat." Whimsy nodded thoughtfully. Did anyone else in the household see him or suspect anything? No one, sir. I didn't say anything at first because I was afraid. Understandable, Whimsy said kindly. Your information is important. Thank you. He dismissed her with a small nod and turned back to the group. This stranger may have been the one who administered the poison or the accomplice who facilitated it. We need to learn more about his movements. A knock interrupted them, and the butler entered with a visitor, Captain Derek Fenton, tall and erect, wearing a dark military overcoat and his characteristic spectacles. Whimsy's eyes narrowed slightly. Captain Fenton, we were just discussing you. The captain's gaze was steady but cautious. I gathered as much. I understand my presence is requested. Indeed, Whimsy said. Your past association with Ambrose is well known. We must explore your relationship and your whereabouts last night and this morning. Captain Fenton nodded slowly. I shall answer your questions as best I can. First, where were you last night after the dinner party? I returned to my lodgings early. I was alone. Can anyone confirm that? No. Whimsy pressed on. Did you know about the new will Ambrose was considering? Only vaguely. He mentioned it once but did not confide in me. Were you aware of any threats or warnings? No, but I was troubled by his mood that evening. Did you send or receive any messages from him recently? No. Then how do you explain your presence near the servants' entrance, as Annie observed? Captain Fenton's expression flickered, then cleared. I was there, yes. I wished to speak to Ambrose privately, but he refused. I left when I saw servants nearby. Did you try the back stair? No, I respected his privacy. Very well. And this morning? I came to pay my respects once I heard the news. Whimsy studied him intently. Your story is consistent, but we shall verify it. Turning to Clarissa, he asked, You mentioned Joseph was absent part of the evening. Can you confirm when he left and returned? Clarissa replied, He said he left around 10 to get medicine and returned before midnight, but he seemed uneasy about the errand. Joseph blushed and said, I have no reason to lie, my lord. Yet, Whimsy said quietly, we must be thorough. He motioned to Bunter. Have you discovered anything from the neighbors' or visitors' log? Bunter shook his head. Nothing unusual. The neighbors reported no strangers or disturbances. Whimsy's mind raced, piecing the fragments together. A secret note, a warning. A man in military coat seen near the servants' entrance. The poisoning in the tea. Joseph's questionable errand. A shattered cup. A slow clock in the study. He felt the net tightening, but the threads were tangled. Clarissa, did Ambrose ever mention enemies outside this household? Business rivals, perhaps? She nodded. Yes, he had disputes with a few local landowners and some former military associates. Then the scope broadens. We are dealing with more than a family squabble. Someone had motive, means and opportunity, and the patience to plan a murder with surgical precision. Whimsy paced the room. The poison, cyanide, would have been difficult to obtain. Does anyone here know of someone with access to such substances? Joseph hesitated. I recall hearing Mr. Martingale mention a chemist in the village, but I do not know more. Whimsy paused. Mr. Martingale, have you any knowledge of poisons or their acquisition? Henry looked uncomfortable. No, my lord, merely that some chemicals could be purchased by licensed individuals. Whimsy nodded. Very well. This leaves us with more questions than answers. He turned to the assembled group, voice calm but insistent. We must verify every alibi, check every detail, and press those who are reticent. The truth lies buried beneath layers of fear and deception. Until we uncover it, none can be truly safe. The rain outside had lessened, but the sky remained leaden. Inside, the shadows cast by the flickering candlelight seemed to lengthen, as if waiting to swallow the next secret the night would bring. Whimsy's gaze fixed on the window as a chill wind rattled the panes. The game is afoot, he whispered. and the next move will reveal who truly fears the light. Whimsy turned away from the window, the distant rumble of thunder underscoring the heavy atmosphere that hung over the room. The candlelight flickered weakly, as if mirroring the fragile state of the investigation, each new piece of evidence casting shadows longer and more confusing than before. Yet, despite the darkness, Lord Peter's mind was resolute. The facts, when properly aligned, would illuminate the path forward. He moved deliberately toward the desk where the torn slip lay folded in his pocket. Drawing it out once more, he scrutinized the hurried handwriting, the uneven spacing between words, and the ink's subtle smudge. The note was clearly penned under duress, the hurried script betraying the urgency behind the words. The message itself, "Crossroads at midnight, trust no one," was cryptic but ominous, hinting at a clandestine meeting meant to uncover or prevent something grave. "Bunter," Whimsy said, "let us proceed at once to examine the stationery and ink samples with our expert. The sooner we determine their origin, the better." Bunter nodded and departed quietly, the faint click of the door sealing the room's tension. Clarissa watched Whimsy with a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Lord Peter," she said softly, "what do you make of this note? Do you believe it was truly a warning or a trap?" Whimsy hesitated, folding the note carefully. "Both possibilities weigh on me. The sender feared for Ambrose's safety, certainly. But it could also have been an attempt to lure him to his death, or to draw out the perpetrator. Until we know more, we must consider all angles." Clarissa's eyes glistened. "Ambrose had enemies, but I never imagined it would come to this." "And yet," Whimsy said gently, "he destroyed the solicitor's letter. There is something there he wanted to hide or protect. We must uncover what it was." Just then, Bunter returned, carrying a small sealed envelope containing the expert's preliminary report. "Lord Peter," he announced, "the handwriting expert confirms the note was written on the same paper stock as the solicitor's letters, but the ink differs significantly, suggesting a different pen or batch. The paper likely came from the solicitor's office or a source with access to their supplies." Whimsy's brow furrowed. "So the sender was close enough to the solicitor's circle to obtain the paper, but sought to disguise their writing with different ink." "Precisely, my lord." "Curious," Whimsy murmured. "Someone connected, yet cautious." Clarissa bit her lip. Could it be the solicitor himself, or an associate? "Either, or a third party using that connection as a cover," Whimsy replied. He then turned to the question of timing. "We know Ambrose received the note before midnight, but failed to attend the meeting. That tells us the killer struck before he could act." "And the poison," Clarissa whispered. "Was it meant to silence him before he revealed the truth?" "Likely. The cyanide in his tea was swift and cruel, but how was it administered without suspicion? Only those with access to the study or kitchen could have done so." "Henry Martingale has keys," Clarissa said. "Indeed, but he claims to have been elsewhere early this morning." "And Joseph?" she asked, glancing toward the young man who stood near the door, shifting uneasily. Whimsy studied Joseph carefully. "Your errand to the apothecary, can you recall any details of that night? Anything unusual?" Joseph swallowed. "Only that the roads were empty, sir, and I felt a strange chill, as if something was wrong." "Did you meet anyone? Any figures along the way?" "No, my lord, only the rain and silence." Whimsy nodded, but the unease in Joseph's eyes remained. "Clarissa, you mentioned Annie saw a man in a military coat near the servants' entrance. Did you suspect who he might have been?" Clarissa frowned. "No, but I wonder if it was Captain Fenton." At that moment, the door opened again, and the butler announced, "Captain Derek Fenton, my lord." Captain Fenton entered, his posture rigid but calm. His eyes briefly met Whimsy's before settling on Clarissa. "I understand I am expected," Fenton said, voice measured. Whimsy gestured to a chair. Please, Captain, we must discuss your movements last night and your relationship with Ambrose. Fenton took his seat, folding his hands neatly. I will answer your questions. First, Whimsy began, did you have knowledge of the note directing Ambrose to the crossroads? Fenton's brow creased. No, I was unaware of such a message. Yet Annie saw a man in a military coat near the servants' entrance. Fenton's gaze did not waver. I was there, yes. I wished to speak with Ambrose privately, but he refused. I left before anyone saw me. Your presence near the servants' entrance at that hour is suspicious, Captain, Whimsy said quietly. Can you explain why you did not seek him in his study? Ambrose was a proud man. I respected his wishes and did not force the matter. Whimsy considered this, then asked, Where were you during the time Ambrose was poisoned? At my lodgings. Can anyone confirm your whereabouts? No. The room fell silent. Whimsy's gaze swept over the faces of the household, weighing each in turn. Captain Fenton, your story is plausible but lacks corroboration. We will verify it. He then turned to Clarissa. And you, Mrs. Vanderwick, were you aware of any conflict between Ambrose and Captain Fenton? Clarissa nodded slowly. They had a falling out years ago, something about a dishonor during their service. Ambrose never trusted him again. But you never suspected Fenton might harm him? Never. Whimsy looked to Bunter. Have you learned anything new from the neighbors or village records? Bunter shook his head. No unusual visitors or disturbances. The apothecary confirmed Joseph's visit, but recalls no one else. Whimsy's thoughts raced. The tangled web of motives and opportunities was growing. The poisoned tea, the secret note, the unseen stranger, each piece suggested a conspiracy more complex than a single act of vengeance. Joseph, Whimsy said gently, did you notice anything unusual in the apothecary? Any new customers, strange requests? Joseph frowned. No, my lord, the apothecary was busy but ordinary. No one stood out. Very well, Whimsy replied. We will examine the apothecary's records to be certain. His mind returned to the broken cup on the floor. The delicate china bore traces of poison, but there was no sign of forced entry or struggle. The killer had moved with care and precision. Clarissa, he asked, who prepares Ambrose's tea in the morning? I do, usually, she said. Have you ever noticed anything suspicious about the ingredients or utensils? No. Everything is as it always was. Has anyone else ever helped you in the kitchen early in the day? Only Annie sometimes. Whimsy's eyes narrowed. Annie's testimony is critical. If the man in the military coat was seen near the servants' entrance, it's possible he had access to the kitchen. He looked to Annie, who stood near the door, blushing but resolute. Annie, can you tell me more about this man? Did you notice anything else? Any scent, a token, or a distinctive gait? Annie hesitated, then said, He smelled faintly of tobacco, sir, and he walked with a limp as if injured. Whimsy nodded thoughtfully. A limp. That may narrow our search. He then asked, Did you see this man enter the kitchen or study? No, sir. He stayed outside, then left when he saw me. Did you tell anyone else? No, sir. I was afraid. Thank you, Annie. Your courage is commendable. As Annie left, Whimsy pondered the clues. The man with a limp, the note, the timing of the poisoning. Each element suggested a carefully orchestrated plan to silence Ambrose before he could act. The butler re-entered, announcing a visitor. Dr. Quigley, the village physician. Whimsy greeted him. Doctor, your expertise is needed. Tell me, how quickly does cyanide act once ingested in tea? Dr. Quigley nodded gravely. Almost immediately. Symptoms can appear within seconds. Dizziness, nausea, collapse. Death follows swiftly if the dose is sufficient. Could the poison have been administered beforehand, without Ambrose noticing? Easily, if mixed with tea. The bitterness can be masked. Did you notice anything unusual during your examination? Dr. Quigley hesitated. Ambrose had traces of cyanide on his lips and tongue, but no external injuries. It was clear poisoning, deliberate and precise. Whimsy pressed further. Any sign of the cup or vessel being tampered with? No obvious signs. The cup was shattered when I arrived. Whimsy exchanged a look with Clarissa. The killer planned this with knowledge of the household's routines. Then the killer must be someone trusted, Clarissa whispered. Indeed, Whimsy said. But trust can be a mask. He turned to the assembled group. We will now examine the servants' quarters and question each member about their whereabouts. Every detail matters. The storm outside had settled into a soft drizzle, the clouds parting slightly to reveal a pale moon. The night's mysteries, however, remained thick as ever. As Bunter and Whimsy prepared to leave the study, Whimsy's gaze lingered on the torn note once more. Crossroads at midnight, he muttered, a meeting that never was. Who was meant to meet Ambrose there? Clarissa asked. That remains the question. Whimsy's mind raced with possibilities, a secret ally, a blackmailer, an enemy masked as a friend. Whoever it was, they had wanted Ambrose to come alone, and in that absence lay the key to his murder. The investigation deepened, the shadows closing in. But Whimsy was certain that with patience and persistence, the truth would emerge from the darkness, revealing the hand that had dealt death with such cruel precision. The early morning light filtered faintly through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn carpet as Lord Peter, Whimsy and Bunter moved silently through the servants' quarters. The air was thick with a mixture of tension and the faint scent of damp wool, remnants of the night's rain that had finally eased. Every footstep was measured, every glance exchanged, loaded with unspoken questions. The household, once a place of routine and quiet order, now felt more like a stage set for hidden conflicts and whispered secrets. Whimsy's keen eyes scanned the faces of the assembled servants, each one seated stiffly in the dim common room, hands clasped tightly or nervously wringing aprons and sleeves. Annie sat near the hearth, her youthful expression marked by a tentative bravery that had surfaced after the events of the previous evening. Joseph lingered by the window, shifting uneasily as his dark eyes flicked toward the door every time it creaked. The others, maids, cooks, and footmen, were as varied in temperament as they were in stature, but all shared the same wary anticipation. "Let us begin," Whimsy said quietly but firmly, seating himself opposite the group. "There are questions only you can answer, and every detail, no matter how small, might be vital to discovering the truth behind Master Ambrose's death." The room fell silent, except for the faint crackle of the dying fire. Annie took a deep breath and was the first to speak. "Sir, last night, when I saw the man in the military coat outside the servants' entrance, he walked with a limp, just like I said before. I thought it strange, but I didn't think much of it then. Did you notice anything else about him? Anything that might help us identify him?" Whimsy asked. Annie's eyes narrowed in concentration. "He smelled of tobacco, sir. Strong, like pipe smoke. And when he saw me, he seemed startled, but didn't say a word before turning away." Whimsy nodded thoughtfully. "Pipe smoke. A useful detail. Joseph, did you see or hear anything unusual last night?" Joseph hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't see the man, but I heard footsteps in the hallway around the time Master Ambrose usually went to bed. They were slow and careful, like someone trying not to wake anyone." "Did the footsteps lead anywhere in particular?" Whimsy asked. "To the study door, I think. I wasn't certain, though. I was just about to fetch some water for Master Ambrose when I heard them." "Did you see who it was?" "No, sir. The hall was too dark, and I was still in the kitchen." Whimsy's gaze sharpened. "And you did fetch water for Master Ambrose?" "Yes, sir, just before he went to bed." "And the tea? Who prepared that?" "Annie, mostly. But last night Mrs. Vanderwick was in the kitchen until quite late. Clarissa's pale face appeared at the door frame, and she stepped inside quietly, as if drawn by the weight of the conversation. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said softly, "but I thought you should know something." Wimsey gestured for her to continue. "Last night, after Master Ambrose retired, I went to his study to bring him a book. The door was locked, so I left it at the threshold and knocked gently. When there was no answer, I assumed he was asleep." "Did you notice anything unusual about the door or room?" Wimsey asked. "No, but this morning when the poison was discovered, I noticed the lock had been tampered with, scratches on the wood as if someone had tried to force it open." "Interesting," Wimsey murmured. "And the teacup?" Clarissa's eyes flickered with distress. "It was shattered on the floor near the desk. The china is delicate and rare. I asked the housekeeper if anyone else had handled it, but she said only Annie and I prepared anything in the kitchen last night." Wimsey's mind pieced together the fragments: the locked door, the shattered cup, the mysterious visitor with a limp. It painted a picture of a carefully orchestrated intrusion. "Annie," Wimsey said gently, "was there anyone in the kitchen who did not belong last night? Anyone you did not recognize?" Annie shook her head, voice trembling slightly. "No, sir. Only me, Joseph, and Mrs. Vanderwyck." Bunter cleared his throat. "My lord, if I may," he said, drawing Wimsey's attention to a small notebook he held. "The housekeeper mentioned that a box of rare teas was delivered to the household yesterday morning. She said it was left unopened in the pantry." Wimsey's eyes lit with interest. "A new delivery. The question is, who handled it?" "I've checked the delivery records," Bunter continued. "The box was signed for by Henry Martingale, the butler, but he denies opening it." Wimsey's thoughts turned immediately to Martingale. The ever-efficient butler, with his impeccable manners and cool demeanor, was a pillar of the household, yet the evidence suggested he might be less forthcoming than appearances implied. "Where is Mr. Martingale now?" Wimsey asked. "Preparing the morning service, my lord," Bunter answered. "He awaits your questions." "Very well," Wimsey said. "Bring him here." Moments later, Martingale entered the room, his face an unreadable mask of composure. "Mr. Martingale," Wimsey began, "there was a delivery of tea yesterday morning. Can you confirm the chain of custody for that box?" Martingale nodded smoothly. "Yes, my lord. I signed for the package and placed it in the pantry, as per usual protocol. I did not open it myself." "Then who opened it?" Wimsey pressed. "Miss Annie, with Mrs. Vanderwick's permission, prepared the tea last night." "Did you notice anything unusual about the tea or packaging?" "No, my lord. Everything appeared in order." "Yet the tea was poisoned with cyanide," Wimsey said slowly, watching Martingale's expression closely. Martingale's composure faltered for the briefest moment before he replied, "That is deeply troubling, my lord. But I can assure you I had no knowledge of it." Wimsey's gaze was sharp. "Mr. Martingale, this household is in turmoil, and trust is in short supply. I must ask, do you know of anyone here who might have motive or opportunity to harm Master Ambrose?" Martingale hesitated, then shook his head. "No, my lord." Wimsey exchanged a glance with Bunter, noting the slight tension in Martingale's jaw. "Very well," Wimsey said. "For now, that will do." As Martingale withdrew, Clarissa stepped forward, voice soft but firm. "Lord Peter, if I may, there is one other matter that troubles me." "Please," Wimsey encouraged. "It concerns Captain Fenton. He was seen near the servants' entrance last night, as you know, but I've heard rumors, whispers among the village folk, about a falling out between him and Ambrose. Something about a betrayal during the war." Wimsey nodded slowly. "Yes, you mentioned this before. Do you think Captain Fenton could have been involved?" "It is possible," Wimsey admitted, "but we must not jump to conclusions." At that moment, Bunter returned with a folded piece of paper, the apothecary's ledger. "Lord Peter," he said, "I've examined the records from last night. There is a note indicating a purchase of potassium cyanide, but it is listed under a different name, one I do not recognize." Whimsy unfolded the ledger and scanned the entry. The name was unfamiliar, a crude alias likely meant to conceal the buyer's identity. "A clever disguise," Whimsy remarked, "but not clever enough." He looked at Joseph. "You made the trip to the apothecary last night. Did anyone approach you? Anyone who might have given you instructions?" Joseph looked startled. "No, my lord. I was alone." "Did the apothecary say anything unusual?" "No, only that the potion was ready and the price paid." "Who paid the price?" Joseph shook his head. "I do not know. I was only the messenger." Whimsy considered this carefully. "Someone here is hiding something." The room seemed to close in around them as the weight of suspicion deepened. Suddenly, a sharp knock interrupted the moment, and the butler entered with a telegram. Whimsy took the envelope, breaking the seal with deliberate care. The message was brief but urgent. "Urgent. Meet me at Crossroads immediately. There are truths that must come to light." Anonymous. The same cryptic message Ambrose had received before his death. "Another message," Whimsy said aloud. "Clearly someone wishes to communicate, but remains hidden." Clarissa's face paled. "Could this be a trap?" "Perhaps," Whimsy answered. "But it is also an opportunity. We must discover who sent it and what truth they hold." He folded the telegram and tucked it into his coat. "Bunter," Whimsy said, "prepare a carriage. We shall visit the Crossroads at once." The servants watched silently as the pair moved with purpose toward the door. The storm may have passed, but the gathering clouds of deceit and danger had only thickened. Outside, the morning mist clung low to the ground, wrapping the world in a ghostly shroud. As the carriage rolled away from the house, Whimsy's mind raced through the strands of the mystery. The poisoned tea, the torn note, the unknown visitor with a limp, and the shadowy messages that hinted at hidden meetings and dangerous alliances. Who was the anonymous correspondent, and what secret lay waiting at the crossroads? The answers, Whimsy knew, would not come easily. But with every step forward, the intricate dance of truth and deception drew closer to its final act. The carriage moved steadily along the winding country road, its wheels crunching softly over the gravel as the morning mist curled around the trees like ghostly tendrils. Inside, Lord Peter Whimsy sat quietly, his gaze fixed ahead, but his mind racing to untangle the threads of the case that had ensnared the household. Bunter sat opposite, alert and ready, the usual calm in his manner only heightening the gravity of the moment. "This anonymous message," Whimsy mused aloud. "It suggests that someone knows more than they've dared to say so far, but who would risk sending such a note, knowing the potential danger?" Bunter adjusted his cap. "A desperate person, perhaps, or someone who believes the truth will set them free or doom them." Whimsy nodded thoughtfully. "Or someone who wishes to manipulate the investigation by drawing us to a particular place." He glanced briefly at Bunter. "We must be prepared for anything." The crossroads lay a few miles from the estate, where two narrow lanes intersected beneath towering oaks whose limbs stretched like fingers into the sky. The spot was a natural meeting place, often used for secretive rendezvous by those wishing to avoid prying eyes. As the carriage neared, the fog seemed to thicken, dampening sound and shrouding the world in grey. Whimsy and Bunter disembarked quietly, stepping onto the soft earth. The chill in the air bit at their cheeks, but there was no sign of another soul. No light, no figure waiting, just the whisper of leaves and the faint hum of distant birds. "Patience," Whimsy said, scanning the shadows. "If the sender intended to meet, they will come." Minutes passed. Then a figure emerged from behind a clump of bushes, cautious and quick. It was Clarissa, her face pale but resolute. "My lord," she said softly, "I received the telegram as well. I thought it best to come." Whimsy gave a small nod. You were wise. This may be dangerous. Clarissa stepped closer, glancing nervously around. I don't know who sent it, but I believe there is more at stake here than we suspected. Ambrose was involved in something beyond the usual. What do you mean? Whimsy prompted. She lowered her voice. Before he died, he spoke to me about letters. Letters from the war. Documents that suggested a betrayal in the ranks. Something that could ruin reputations. I thought it was mere gossip, but now I'm not so sure. Bunter's eyebrows lifted. If Ambrose was investigating, it could explain the motive for his murder. Whimsy pursed his lips. Indeed. We need to find those letters. Where? Clarissa asked, her eyes searching his face. First, we must see if anyone else is watching us. Whimsy's gaze flicked toward the tree line. This is no place for a straightforward meeting. Someone could be lurking. They moved cautiously back toward the carriage, but a sudden rustling startled them. From the shadows stepped Joseph, his expression grim. I heard footsteps behind us, he said quickly. I followed, but lost the trail near the edge of the woods. Thank you, Joseph. Whimsy fixed him with a steady look. Did you recognize the footsteps? Hard to say, sir. They were heavy, and there was a limp. Whimsy's mind returned to Annie's earlier description. A limp, he repeated. That visitor last night. Bunter spoke, his tone clipped. We need to find that man. He is the key. The group agreed, and Whimsy decided their next step was to question the villagers who might have seen the mysterious figure. Back in the carriage, the journey toward the nearby village was swift but silent. Upon arrival, Whimsy and Bunter separated to canvass the locals, while Clarissa and Joseph remained behind to watch the house and keep the servants calm. The village was quiet, the morning still young. Whimsy approached the baker's shop first, a small, weathered building with flour-dusted windows. Inside, Mrs. Aldridge, the baker's wife, was arranging loaves on a shelf. Good morning, Mrs. Aldridge. I'm Lord Peter Whimsy, he began politely. I'm investigating a matter of some urgency, and wonder if you might have seen a man fitting a particular description. She smiled faintly. Depends on the description, my lord. A man wearing a military coat, walking with a noticeable limp. Mrs. Aldridge paused, then nodded slowly. Aye. There was someone like that yesterday afternoon. He came in here, asked for directions to the crossroads, seemed anxious, didn't stay long. Did you notice anything unusual about him? Whimsy asked, leaning slightly forward. Not much, except he carried a small satchel and kept looking over his shoulder. He paid in coins, not a penny less. Whimsy exchanged a glance with Bunter, who had joined him. Did he say where he was going? Whimsy pressed. Only that he needed to meet someone, Mrs. Aldridge replied. Thank you, Mrs. Aldridge. Very helpful. Whimsy stepped outside, his thoughts already turning. Nearby, a young boy approached, eyes wide with curiosity. Sir, I saw that man too, the boy said breathlessly. He stopped by Old Man Reed's place and talked to him for a bit. Old Man Reed? Whimsy asked. The recluse who lives by the mill pond. No one sees him much, but that day the man and Reed spoke for a long time. Bunter muttered, That could be the break we need. The carriage returned to the estate as the sun climbed higher. Clarissa greeted them with tense eyes. Have you learned anything? She asked. A visitor with a limp, carrying a satchel, Whimsy said. He was seen meeting Old Man Reed. That is where we must go next. Bunter and Whimsy prepared to leave at once, Clarissa joining them. Joseph would stay to manage the household and watch for further disturbances. The path to the mill pond was narrow and bordered by thick undergrowth. As they walked, Whimsy's thoughts circled the puzzle pieces. The poison, the mysterious man, the forged ledger, and the war documents. Old Man Reed's cottage appeared through the trees, a small, weather-beaten structure with smoke curling lazily from the chimney. They approached cautiously, footsteps muffled by moss. Whimsy knocked firmly. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing a gaunt figure with sharp, wary eyes. "Who seeks old man Reed?" the man rasped. "I am Lord Peter Wimsey, investigating the death of Ambrose," Wimsey said calmly. "We understand you spoke with a man recently. May we come in?" Reed's eyes flicked toward the path, then back. He stepped aside reluctantly. Inside, the cottage smelled of damp wood and herbs. Reed motioned for them to sit. "I do not like visitors," he muttered, "but I owe Ambrose a debt." "Please," Wimsey encouraged, "tell us what you know." Reed's gaze hardened. "The man who came, he was desperate. Asked if I still had letters Ambrose left with me during the war. He wanted to buy them back. I refused." "What kind of letters?" Clarissa asked. "Evidence of treachery," Reed replied bitterly. "Names, dates, plans that were betrayed to the enemy. Ambrose kept them safe, but someone wants them destroyed." "Did the man say who he was?" Wimsey asked. "No. He called himself only Carter." Reed shook his head. "But he limped, and he carried cyanide." The mention of the poison made Wimsey's heart quicken. "Why would he want the letters?" "To cover his tracks," Reed said grimly. "To make sure the truth never sees the light." Wimsey's fingers steepled. "You are certain Ambrose had these letters?" "As sure as I am sitting here." "Where are they now?" Reed pointed to a heavy chest tucked beneath a window. "Safe. For now." Wimsey rose. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. You have done a great service." Outside, the chill of the forest seemed heavier. The danger was closer than ever. As they turned to leave, a sudden crack echoed from the trees. A shadow darted through the underbrush, disappearing swiftly. "Did you see that?" Clarissa gasped. "An attempt to intimidate us," Wimsey said. "Or to silence Reed." They hurried back toward the estate, the sun now high but the mystery deepening like a gathering storm. Inside, Bunter awaited, concern etched on his face. "We must secure those letters," Wimsey said, "and prepare for whatever comes next. The enemy is watching and the hour grows late." The investigation had reached a critical point. The secrets of war, long buried, were clawing their way back to the surface, and with them the deadly stakes of betrayal, poison, and shadowy figures with limping steps. The hunt for truth was far from over, and Wimsey knew that every answer uncovered would only lead to more questions and danger yet unseen. The evening had settled like a velvet curtain over the estate, the last rays of sunlight slipping away as Lord Peter Wimsey stood once more in the drawing-room, the assembled household watching him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The pieces of the intricate puzzle lay spread before him in his mind. The limping visitor, the forged ledger, the secret letters from the war, and the carefully concealed motives beneath polite facades. It was time, he decided, to draw back the veil. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wimsey began, his tone arch yet measured, "we have been dancing around a truth as elusive as a wraith in this house for many days. But as is often the case, the seemingly supernatural masks only very human passions. Jealousy, guilt, and fear." He turned first to Clarissa, whose eyes shone with quiet hope. "You told me of your late husband's concern with letters exposing treachery during the war. Those letters were indeed real, and they placed Ambrose in a position of peril far beyond our initial assumptions." Wimsey moved to the hearth, where the heavy chest containing the letters rested. It was no coincidence that the man who came to the village with a limp, calling himself Carter, sought to recover these documents. That he carried poison was a grim testament to the lengths he was willing to go to keep these secrets buried. "All this, you say," said the butler, Peterson, with a cynical twist of his mouth, "because of some old war letters?" "Precisely," Wimsey replied dryly. "Old wars cast long shadows, and in this case, the shadows have been nurtured into something far more dangerous. He turned to Joseph, the house steward who had seemed an inconspicuous observer throughout. "Joseph, it was your familiarity with the house and the habits of its occupants that allowed you to discover the forged ledger. A crucial red herring designed to distract us from the true motive." Joseph inclined his head. "I only did what seemed right, sir." Whimsy's eyes twinkled faintly. "And right it was. You noticed that the ledger contained accounts that could never have existed. False debts, false payments. A clever ploy to implicate Ambrose in financial misconduct and divert suspicion." "But who?" Clarissa whispered, as if afraid to name the culprit aloud. Whimsy's smile was faint but knowing. "That brings us to our final player. The limp, the poison, the forged documents. All point to one person whose presence has been obscured behind servility and propriety." He gestured toward Peterson. "You, Peterson. Your resentment toward Ambrose, your secret meetings with Carter, and your knowledge of every corner in this house gave you the perfect opportunity." The room gasped. Peterson's expression twisted with disbelief and fury. "I loved this family, sir," he protested, voice shaking. "But Ambrose threatened everything. His recklessness, his stubbornness. He would have destroyed us all." Whimsy nodded, unimpressed. "Indeed. And so you plotted, forging ledgers to suggest financial ruin, and when Ambrose threatened to expose you, you resorted to poison and hired Carter to retrieve those letters by any means necessary." Peterson's facade cracked. "You have no proof." "Proof?" Whimsy said, producing a small folded piece of paper. "This letter, slipped from your coat pocket, contains the very signature you forged in the ledger, and the cyanide found in the carriage matches a container in your quarters." The butler's shoulders sagged. "So it ends here." "Indeed," Whimsy said, with the faintest hint of satisfaction. "You underestimated the power of petty details. The misaligned clock, the overlooked footprint, the forged entry. Your carefully constructed house of cards has collapsed." As officers stepped forward to take Peterson into custody, Whimsy turned to Clarissa with a soft smile. "Your husband's legacy will no longer be tarnished by deceit." Clarissa nodded, tears glistening. "Thank you, Lord Peter." Whimsy allowed himself a brief moment of triumph before quipping lightly, "I dare say I have never found poison such an effective social lubricant at a country house party." With a final glance around the room, the detective stepped toward the door. "Justice may be slow, but it is inexorable, and today it has been served with all the dry wit and decorum this case demanded." Outside, the night had deepened, the stars shining cold and clear. Lord Peter Whimsy's footsteps echoed softly as he departed, leaving behind a household forever altered, secrets unearthed, and an enduring testament to the power of logic and observation over shadow and suspicion.